Hello and welcome to the Scrum Sessions podcast. Here in Dallas, I am Q on a very sunny day. And my friend in Berlin, it's you.
Hey everyone, I'm Gary on. As Q said, I'm based in Berlin, Germany. And today we want to talk about AI, right? At least since ChatGPT 3 came out, it's in everybody's mouth. And we hear a lot of stuff about, what's going to happen with our jobs, what's going to happen to knowledge work, how does it impact Scrum and Agile in general. And we want to just talk a little bit about it and see where this is taking us because it's still fairly new. And I think a lot of people will find it helpful to get some orientation. So I think one of the big issues that we have when we talk about AI is that unless you're an expert in that field, then congratulations, you are probably in very high demand and can renegotiate your salary package right about now. But unless you're an expert, you probably have some problems orienting yourself to what is actually going on, right? Because there's so many terms being thrown around and you actually need to know on a base level what's going on. And so what I would like to start with is this categorization. It's really not important once you have understood it, but you kind of have to know what it is to see like what level of AI do you expect. And so there's actually three categories. And the first one is narrow AI, right? It's some very specific AI. Let's say it's an analysis AI that looks at pictures of cancer scans in a medical context, right? And it can detect cancers, right? It's very narrow. It's not very threatening unless you're that person that is doing that job. Then there is general AI, meaning it's almost like on a human level. So now we're talking about an AI that can actually do a lot of stuff, not necessarily as well, like every task as well as a normal general human, but it's pretty darn advanced, right? And then there's super AI, which means it's a godlike being, right? It can do like basically everything we can do on a higher level and in a better way. And this is where things get really threatening.
Okay, so if I had hair would be on fire right now. I am going to lose my job. So is that what AI is going to do for me? Get me fired?
You might. It depends on it, right? So if we build up that super intelligence, I think we're all out of a job because I think some Terminator stuff might be happening pretty soon, but this is actually quite far away if we ever reach it, right? So I think people are really fixated on this super intelligence, but that's still far away. I get that we need to start thinking about it right now and put in security protocols, but this is not going to happen very soon, right? So we don't need to worry about that much. And then it kind of comes down to it. So if you do a job that can be done better by a narrow AI. So for example, looking at cancer scans, then yes, you might be out of a job pretty soon because the AI usually can do it much quicker than you can probably do it cheaper than you can, and it can actually look at more scans over time, right? And then be able to detect cases that might not be as frequent, right? You might not see enough cases to ever detect them, but the AI might. So there's a lot of different opinions on it, but I think, yes, you might very well lose your job, but it kind of depends on what you're doing.
Actually, what worries me is not losing my job. I don't worry that the world is going to end in 2 years, like somebody just said last week. Or we're going to start saying, I'll be back all the time, right? I'm not worried about this. I'm really about to worry this about the Luddites. Because when the Industrial Revolution started, people go there and break the machines because they're going to take my job, right? And I think people are very myopic when they don't realize there are several tasks that are very boring. They're very time-consuming, and they're downright dangerous, right? And we should actually get ourselves out of that business, right? And I think, when I think about this, and forget the three categories of AI, I think about it as something that augments my capacity, my capability, my abilities of do things. So in your case for the cancer scans, right? Okay, yeah, you can see that being scanned, you can see that's going to do much faster and etc. But still, everything has to be peer reviewed. So it's a lot better for me to get some automated thing to scan 500 things and alert me, hey, this one may be suspicious, right? And then I can make a decision based on that. I cannot accept the AI view of it, or I can say, no, based on my experience, this is something that you don't know, you couldn't identify, etc. So I was kidding about losing my job and all that stuff. I'm less concerned about this. I think I am very concerned. It's about the people who think. I mean, there were people setting fires on 5G masts, right? There are people breaking stuff. I think people are going to get in the same thing. Oh, this thing's going to take my job, so let's set fire on computers or that sort of stuff. How do you feel about that?
So I think the best metaphor that I've heard about this is that it's actually kind of like the tractor, right? So if we think about a tractor, it's really unsexy. Nobody ever thinks about a tractor unless you're like working in that field or you have some fetish and play computer games around it. But I don't ever think about tractors, don't care, right? But when tractors were introduced, they made a lot of manual labor superfluous, right? A lot of people were working in the fields and the tractor was a revolution and it made those jobs obsolete. And so I think it kind of depends on what perspective you take. If you take like a more economic, broader strategic view, then this is probably one of the best things that has happened to humanity, straight up. And it's one of the biggest opportunities for us being alive. Maybe bigger than the internet, maybe bigger than mobile phones, right? It's a really big opportunity. However, if you're actually one of the people that is working in the fields, it doesn't really help you that somebody's telling you, yeah, well, you'll find something new in time and you don't have to work in the dirt anymore because this is actually what you want to do or what you've been doing and you need to find an income pretty soon, right? And where you're going to find that new job if there are not a lot of them around, right? So I think it really depends on the perspective. As far as the Luddites go, yes, I see that. And I'm not actually sure if this is going to be a traditional Luddite problem or if it's not the same vaccination, misinformation, idiot crowd that we've been seeing jumping from one topic to the next topic, just like always trying to get riled up on something, right? And so this is going to be the new thing for them, that they're going to jump on this anti-AI bandwagon. But, you know, you always have village idiots and they're going to find the next topic and I don't think they're going to really change anything.
Yeah, and you always have to consider that people overall don't like change, right? The majority of people are not comfortable with change. There are people like you and I think even I'm even worse than you. I buy different cell phones every 3 months. I'm looking for a new laptop. I'm always looking for technology, and not only technology, other things. I like change, right? But the majority of the people are uncomfortable. And on top of that, there are the clickbaits that we see all over the news and etc., that try to foster this fear of change even further because then they sell clicks, right? And then people can go after that. Now, I always thought as a professional in any area, and I may even inject the words business agility here because it's a topic that's very near and dear to me, right? You should be always observing the trends, right? Otherwise, you always be caught by surprise. When you're caught by surprise, well, your reaction may be suboptimal and you can get in a lot of trouble, right? So I think we always should be observing the trends in the industry, right? Okay, so in your case, maybe I like to drive the tractor, right? And now the tractor can pretty much, you program the GPS and the tractor goes there, right? But we're still not to the point that you can get rid of every single operator because there are some decisions that the system cannot make by themselves, right? And again, that's why I always keep in my mind the augmentation of things, right? If, for instance, I say I need to write a business letter or business proposition or something for some reason, right? Instead of spending all the time doing that, I can generate one really easy, and then I just go there and make the changes that are necessary for me. So instead of spending half an hour typing, and you know how bad I am at typing, right? I can generate something and just make some minute changes or whatever change I want to make. And I did that in 5 minutes. So I can use the rest of the hour I would be typing that stuff for half an hour to do something else, right? So I am very keen on the idea of augmentation.
So now that you've brought up business agility, I actually think that AI is the case in point to see how good a business's agility is. Because frankly, I think too many people have been taken by surprise by AI. It should have been on a lot more people's radar, right? Because it didn't come out of nowhere, right? It feels like it, but it didn't really. So I think a lot of people should have been more aware. Their radar system, their detection systems should have been in place. But okay, that happens. But what's really striking to me is how quickly did businesses pivot to make use of AI in their internal tools, right? So for example, use Copilot, use ChatGPT internally, like you just described, but also how are they implementing AI into their products, for example? And so I think it's been, I don't know, I have a bad time feeling, let's say 4 to 5 months since AI really blew up. And I think if you are a so-called agile organization, right? If you think you're agile, and you weren't aware of what's happening in AI, and then you suddenly found out, and you still haven't adapted to it, you still haven't made drastic changes to it, I think you might not have as much business agility as you're thinking, because this is a big topic on the development side, on the delivery side, as well as on the product side. And I think this is really the litmus test where you can really check how agile is your organization. How much have you incorporated this change? Because this is really urgent. This has a lot of power behind it, a lot of productivity gains. And if you're too slow to adapt to it, you might run into trouble down the line.
No, you're absolutely right. But I always like to make a distinction between the urgency of something in order to be agile, to respond to it, and the hype, right? You and I work in IT. Let's be serious. IT is driven by hype more than anything else, right? We saw that with the crypto thing, and now we see the fiasco the whole crypto thing turned out to be, right? Because there was too much hype. I don't think that's the case. I think the whole AI thing is very interesting, very important, and will bring some really good benefits, but we have to discount some of the hype that's associated with it. And I think hype is always damaging because it may turn out to disappoint a lot of people. But I think that's the biggest problem.
I don't know if I agree with that because, yes, of course, there's always hype. And you can actually see it in some of the tools that you're being shown on social media, and then you check them out and it's like, well, this isn't that great. So hype is always there. But I mean, Kevin Scott, the CTO of Microsoft, he said that 40% of their code is actually being generated internally, like at Microsoft is being generated by Copilot. And I know of teams that have immediately pivoted to start using Copilot, and the results are enormous, right? The productivity went through the roof. And so you can see, I mean, this is not talk anymore. You can actually see the productivity gains. And you just described how you're doing it for writing letters and so on, right? And think about marketing teams, how much they can profit from ChatGPT alone, but also more fine-tuned models that help in marketing. And so I think on the delivery side, the writing is already on the wall. I mean, you can, if you spend the time to investigate, you can actually see the productivity gains that you can make. And just think about, let's say something like Copilot giving you 5 more percentage points of developer productivity. Think about how much money that is if you don't just have one developer, right? If you have a bunch of them, maybe hundreds of them, and you use a tool like that, how much money, how much productivity can be gained. And so, yes, there's hype.
Yeah.
But we can actually see, we can, do a Gemba walk and see what's going on, and it's crazy.
No, I don't disagree with, for instance, the code stuff. I am big into home automation, and about 2 weeks ago, I was looking to do something in PowerShell to automate a routine, and I could not remember for my life what PowerShell command I needed to do that, right? So I jumped in there, said, hey, show me code to do this. Bingo, pop me some code in there. I didn't like, I tweaked the code slightly, and I use the code otherwise, right? So again, augmentation. On the other hand, you have to be careful with the hype, because I think it was last week and the week before, it was all over the news. This guy, I think was Avianca versus somebody, right? And the attorney for the defendant went there and generated a bunch of stuff, and there were 4 references in there, and he submitted like that. And the judge looked and said, none of these things exist, right? So again, that's the hype. And that's the misuse of the thing. Just because you got something in writing, sort of speak, it doesn't mean that's true, right? Which holds true for a lot of, 98% of you see in the web is garbage, right? It's misinformation and all that stuff. And I know it's 98, I just made that up, right? But you cannot get an output or something and assume that's good because a machine gave it to you.
Absolutely.
That's where I think, that's where the hype comes to play.
Yeah, and the models are hallucinating. Sometimes they sometimes give you really crazy results. And it's funny if you're like a little bit more public, if you have podcasts, for example, and then you like ask it something about yourself and then it gives you like completely made up stuff. That's actually kind of scary, right? Because some people will take it at face value. And like, where's your recourse, right? If a Wikipedia article on you is wrong, you can write to Wikipedia, right? But if the model is hallucinating about you, like how do you correct that if people then go on and take it at face value?
Yeah. Well, even if the model refers to Wikipedia, right? There's also the problem of validation, what somebody put in Wikipedia, right? Which there has been several people to demonstrate that you can put a fake link in there and through a bunch of stuff make the link look like legitimate, right? So there is always that. Now, that's why I make such a careful consideration about have to be careful with hype, right? Of course, the technology is going to be great. I already benefited from that in multiple times, especially because I keep saying I suck at typing, right? And all that stuff. But we have to be careful not to assume that models that are relatively recent, they're still evolving and etc., are like the end of all and they're going to resolve everything. Now, because I'm very concerned about security, right? And you know that I lock everything down and all that stuff. I'm also concerned about privacy and security because I believe Samsung just made no, don't put corporate data on this stuff, right? And I think a lot of companies are not paying attention to this. People are just typing stuff in there that may be and very likely is intellectual property, and they're throwing stuff in there, right? And on Bleeping Computer last week, there was actually a bunch of research that somebody said, and there were some astonishing amounts of very sensitive data being thrown on those models, right? So you have to be careful with that. So again, we have to educate people. We have to do a lot of legwork before we get too much into the hype mode that I so fear.
I'm not disagreeing, but I actually think that violence of action is the choice here, because if you can get these productivity gains, and you were describing them before, you have to take them. If you don't take them and you don't take them soon, then your competitors are going to do that, right? And so I actually think that on the delivery side, if you're still mucking around, if you still haven't invested the time to get into the tools, to look at those that are available to you and start learning them and start to integrate them, you're really missing out and you're making a mistake, right? Of course, be mindful that you don't put in proprietary data and so on. Be mindful of the results that you get, that the model isn't hallucinating. But if you're, for example, if you're a developer and you haven't tried out Copilot or another tool like it, actually, I think you're not doing your job. You have to do it. It's an incredible chance to increase your productivity. And if you want to be agile and you're not looking at a game changer like this, you are doing something wrong, in my opinion.
No, I totally agree with you. I just have some concerns about privacy, data security, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think a lot of those things are not being considered because of the hype behind it. Now, the usefulness of the tool, yeah, I've been using it. I've been playing with that for the past 2 months, right? And there are lots of good things that can come up from it. But I also seen some really dumb answers and all that stuff you call hallucination. Just say, it's just some things evolve. But I fear stuff that's hosted somewhere. I don't know who is manipulating the data and all that stuff, right? I am quite sure that Microsoft, on their models they have internally, I doubt that code is getting out of the door, right? So we have to be very, very careful with that. Now, you know me, I am against regulation. I don't think regulation solves anything. There's already people saying we have to regulate AI and all that stuff. I said, great. Believe me, the people misusing it, they wouldn't care less if you're regulating or not, right? So I think what we have to do is, instead of regulate, we have to educate. Because regulation, if you are a bad guy, you want to use that thing for some nefarious usage or some sort, hey, you don't care if it's regulated or not. Do you? I don't, right? But I think it's more about educate. I think we have to take this opportunity to educate everybody on how we can use it, how we can properly use it, how we can benefit from it, and how we can filter out some of the hype instead of just trying to put some heavy-handed regulation, something, because it's not going to benefit anybody and it's going to have absolutely zero effect. Just look at crypto, okay? They did whatever they wanted. Billions of dollars went into vapor and all that stuff. Oh, well, regulation. No, it doesn't matter, it's regulation. People are up and no good. They're going to do it anyway.
So I'm not sure where I stand on regulation as far as AI is concerned. However, I think the cat is most likely already out of the bag, right? Because there's open source models out there and they're getting smaller. You can actually run them on your phone, right? And so the cookie is kind of crumbled. However, the other thing that I just want to touch on real quick is that, OpenAI is pushing for regulations. Sam Altman, the CEO, is. And this, from a business perspective, this is actually a super smart move, right? Because in him pushing for regulation, they being ahead, Microsoft being affiliated with them, and Microsoft having all those lobbyist connections in DC. From a business perspective, this is the gangster move to do, right? Because if there's going to be regulation, guess who's going to be sitting at the table? It's going to be Microsoft. It's going to be OpenAI. They're going to shape the regulation in a way that's going to raise a moat behind. Raise a moat doesn't make sense. It's going to create a moat behind them, right? And then this is a really good business move to keep the competition from creeping up. So yeah, we might like it or might not like the regulation, but I actually think it's going to come pretty soon, and it's a good business move. I'm not sure if it's good for the public benefit, but I think we're going to see it.
I don't question that we're going to see it. I just get scared when corporations get very cozy. When corporations defend anything, there has to be, and usually there is, something behind it, right? So I fear when people get really cozy, let's regulate this, on companies that are always fighting against regulation otherwise. So I question the motives.
Yeah.
I definitely question the motives, and there are some data hogs, and we could say company names here, but I'd rather not, that are probably already misusing this quite a bit. I'm quite sure they are, and that I think we should regulate. It's like, where's this data going and what you're doing with it, right? But prevent people from doing bad things. Doesn't matter if you're regulated or not. Right? It's just going to happen.
Mm-hmm. So, the other thing that I think is really important for organizations, if they try to capitalize on it, is to look more on the product management, product owner side. And here I'm getting a feeling that a lot of people don't understand the urgency, the strategic urgency of actually getting into a defensible position with AI. Because if you think about it, right, there's going to be these generalized models like GPT or Lambda or some of the other models, right? So these are these broad, big models. And then there's going to be some training that's going to happen, some fine-tuning, right? And there's going to be specific functions that are going to be created out of this. So, for example, the cancer scan that we talked about earlier. And now my question is to all the CEOs out there that are thinking about, maybe we should be doing something about AI. If you're in the cancer scanning business, how many companies worldwide do you think will be left that will have a fine-tuned, fine-trained cancer scanning model? Because I actually think it's not going to be 5,000. It's going to be 3 or 4, because the investment to train models is, depending on the use case, quite substantial, right? And it also benefits from seeing a lot of cases, right? So the training to get it to a certain level is one thing, But then if you just feed it with more and more data, it gets better over time. It's like a Benjamin Button product, right? It gets younger and better over time. It doesn't age, it ages in reverse. And so I think in the end, in a lot of these industries where AI is going to have an effect, there's going to be there's just going to be a couple of companies that are going to be left standing. And if we assume this to be true, there's actually a race on to develop the AI application in your field. And if I look at a lot of companies, I think they are not recognizing it, right? They are not in a race, or they're not behaving like they're in a race, even though they actually are. And it's not only that there's not going to be 5,000 specific models for everything. There's also another effect taking place in that people are waking up to the fact how valuable their data is, right? So we have always heard this term that data is the new oil, or data is the oil of the 21st century, and so on. But if you're not like Google and have like these masses of data, or Facebook and so on, it didn't really apply. But now we're in the situation that if you wanted to create that specific AI to scan for cancer, for example, you will have to feed the model with data, right? And so where are you going to get that? Do you already have that? Do you have the permission to use it? Or do you have to buy it? Do you have to get it from somewhere for free? And now people are actually waking up to the fact how valuable this data is. So for example, Reddit has blocked GPT and the other models from using the data on Reddit to train the models, right? Because they're saying, well, these models are very valuable and you are actually training them on our data. So we want a piece of the cake, right? And so I see this happening all around, that people are suddenly realizing, like a year ago, they would say, here, have this medical data, right? They would make sure that everything is legit, but they wouldn't mind giving you the data. And now suddenly they're saying, whoa, let's hold off for a second, and let's look at what are you actually going to do? Are you actually going to build like a specific AI for these cases? And then let's talk about compensation. And as people wake up, it gets harder and harder to get that data for free or for a good price. And so you actually have an incentive to get started right now, to get the cheap data, to train your model, and to be one of the 3-4 companies globally that actually have that trained model.
Those are great points, and one mistake you can never make in product management is not to monitor the market, not to be up to date with the situations, right? But your point is it's great. We are seeing this already, saying, wait a minute, you're getting my data for free and you're making money out of it. So where's my cut on this stuff, right? Which is perfectly fine, because it's not your data, it's their data, right? But I also seen a couple weeks ago that the people being used to tag pictures and overall help train the AI, they're being paid close to nothing, which is abusive, right? So in that scenario, I see regulation being beneficial, because we have to make sure that people are compensated properly, right? And we have to make sure that our intellectual property is not stolen by somebody else, right? With the pretense that they're doing good for the humanity. No, they're not. They're lining up their pockets, right? Which every business should. But that is also very important for us to understand what people want from our data and how we're going to have our benefit from that, our financial reasons to let you have access to that data, right? So I think there is a lot of stuff that has to be taught. And I think because for most people, it got them by surprise. Now it's like, oh, we forgot about this. Oh, we forgot about that. We forgot about that. We didn't think about that, right? Which now you have to run after that. But I'm there with you. A lot of people won't survive because they don't have and this is a broad term, they don't have the business agility to be resilient. Business agility is all about resiliency, right? And in cases like that is when you put to test whether or not your organization is resilient. Because if you're not, you're going to collapse, right? And the same token, I think about UI and other professionals, right? If we don't incorporate AI in our daily things, we are going to go by the way of the dodo bird, right? We're not going to, our resilience is minimal or close to nothing. So you always have to adapt to the situation. That's why I said you always have to be monitoring the situations in the market, the demand. what people are looking for, and et cetera, et cetera. Anybody who just say, well, nothing is ever going to change, and that's all I want to do. You're going to go the way of the dodos, the dinosaurs, and the Ford Pinto, the DeLorean, all the other stuff. I can have a huge list here, right?
Yeah. All right. Any other thoughts on the topic?
No, I think it was a great conversation, right? I think I initially told you we should talk about this because in the latest Scrum sessions we talked about this for like 40 minutes out of the hour, right? And it's a great topic for conversation. And I hope when people listen to the podcast say, hey, if I'm not paying attention to this, perhaps I should start paying attention right now, right? It's about resiliency. From Dallas, I am Q, and as always, my friend in Berlin has the last word. And today he also had the first word.
And actually, I have something prepared. So I would like to end with a quote by William Gibson, who is a quite famous science fiction author. And he said, the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. And that means if everyone else is already doing AI and you're not, you got to get your act together and go for it. All right. Thanks, everyone. We hope you keep watching us and talk to you the next time. Bye-bye.